presented by the New Orleans Secular Humanist Association, following our few principles of humanism.
We're committed to the use of science and reason for understanding the universe and for solving human problems. We're skeptical of untested claims of knowledge, but we're open to new ideas.
We are concerned with securing justice and fairness in society and in ending intolerance and discrimination. We are committed to the total separation of religion and government.
We affirm humanism as a realistic alternative to the theologies of despair and the ideologies of violence. We reject the concept of an afterlife and believe in living a full and rewarding life here and now.
We value and respect each individual's right to judge and lead their lives according to their own position, as long as it's respectful of other people living in a free society.
We hope you enjoy today's program and others in the weeks to follow. Hello again. Thanks for being with us. I'm Harry Greenberger, and I've been hosting this show for quite a few years. Our guest today, who has also done a previous show with us, is Walter Block. Walter is a professor of economics at Loyola University here in New Orleans, and in addition to teaching his economics courses at Loyola, he's a very prolific author. And just to give you some idea of some of his recent books, his current one, written in 2012, is called Yes to Ron Paul and Liberty. Some of the others that he's written just in the last few years were The Case for Discrimination, the privatization of roads and highways, labor economics from a market perspective, employing the unemployable, and defending the undefendable. So that gives you an idea of where Walter's coming from. But today I want to talk about something that is a current topic, because in the presidential race in 2012 for next 4 years, the whole topic of free enterprise capitalism and Ayn Rand and her theories has become quite a topic of reporting and conversation. And the Republican vice presidential candidate, Paul Ryan, is a devotee of Ayn Rand. And of course, many of us are familiar with her books, one of which, Atlas Shrugged, which is an 1,100-page book. Our guest in his introductory economics course at Loyola requires each student to read that book, Atlas Shrugged, which is good fiction, but it also carries a potent message. So I'd like for us to talk about Ayn Rand, her philosophy, how it's really is playing out in contemporary politics, and where you stand on her philosophy.
Well, let me preface that by first thanking you for having me on your show again, and telling you a personal story about me and Ayn Rand. I was at Brooklyn College, an undergraduate, and Brooklyn Jews are all socialist pinkos, and I was one. And Ayn Rand came to Brooklyn College to speak, and she talked about greed and selfishness and capitalism. And I came to boo and hiss her because everyone knew that greed and selfishness and private property rights and free enterprise would just lead to misery for the people.
All terrible concepts.
All horrible things. And there must have been 3,000 of us, and I was booing. And at the end, they said the Ayn Rand Study Club, I forget the name of the group that had invited her to Brooklyn College, was having a lunch in her honor, and anyone could come even if you disagreed. So I came, and there was this long table, and Ayn Rand was sitting at the head of it, and Alan Greenspan, the former head of the Fed, was at one side, and Nathaniel Branden on the other, Leonard Peikoff, and all of her chief lieutenants. And I was relegated to the foot of the table at the opposite end, and I was maybe 100 feet away from her. It was a long, long table. And I turned to my neighbor and I says, "What's this capitalism stuff? Socialism is the way to go." And he said, well, I don't really know, but the people who do are up at the other end of the table. So I was a chutzpahnik then, still am. And I stuck my head in between Ayn's and Nathan's, and I said, there's a socialist here, me, who wants to debate someone over socialism, capitalism. Anyone interested? I was, pretty feisty. And Brandon said, he'll come to the other end of the table and I'll talk to you on 2 conditions. 1, you don't allow this conversation to lapse, but we continue it until we resolve it. And 2, you read 2 books that I'll mention to you. Well, the 2 books were Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand and Economics in One Lesson by Henry Hazlitt. And when I teach economics, I usually assign books like that. And I must have gone to his and Ayn's house several times, and they converted me, and I was sort of an objectivist for a while. I was a devotee of free enterprise. I was a great admirer of Ayn Rand, and that's my personal story.
When you say objectivist, that's the title given to her philosophy.
Right. She did not call herself a libertarian. She rejected libertarianism for esoteric reasons. She called us hippies of the right later. But she was an objectivist. So I suppose I should say the difference between objectivism and free enterprise capitalism. Free enterprise capitalism is based on private property rights and free enterprise and voluntary trade. Objectivism includes that, but it adds on a whole bunch of other things, views on metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, aesthetics, and all sorts of other things. And it even includes some of her personal likes and dislikes. For example, she likes romantic music, not Baroque. And therefore, somehow romantic music is more objectivist, and she loves smoking cigarettes, so if you smoke a cigarette, then it's more objective than if you don't. I, at one time, tried to swallow the whole objectivist thing, but I couldn't. The only part of it I liked, and I like dearly, and have devoted my entire professional career to, is understanding and explaining and accounting for the free enterprise market system.
Does the fact that neither you nor I adopted objectivism, does that take anything away from Ayn Rand's overall message?
Well, I think her overall message is, what resonates to me is the free enterprise, capitalism, private property rights stuff. The other stuff, either I'm not interested in, or it doesn't resonate with me, or I reject it. But that stuff, that is magnificent stuff.
All right, and she and her philosophy is get government out of our lives.
Well, she was not an anarchist, so she had a legitimate role for government. Armies to protect us from foreign bad guys, police to protect us from local bad guys, and courts to determine who the good guys and the bad guys are. Her view was clearly that government is best which governs least. She didn't go and say with the anarchists that government is best which governs not at all. That was too far for her. She wasn't that radical. But she was pretty radical, and that would be the view that animates most libertarians, I would say.
Well, would you say that the current, at least at the time that we are sitting taping this show, the Republican candidates for the presidency and the vice presidency, how far do they go in support of the concepts that Ayn Rand propounded?
Well, Paul Ryan, who you mentioned as the vice presidential candidate for the Republican Party, second to Mitt Romney, is supposedly a fan of hers. I can't speak for her, but if I could, I would say she would reject him as a good fan. I don't think that he's really as limited government and free enterprise as her. But he does give adherence to her and gives her accolades. So I would say that she is having some sort of an effect. She's also having an effect with the Libertarian Party, Gary Johnson, because many of the libertarians supporting Gary Johnson also are Ayn Rand fans.
I would think that they would be. But now, from that perspective, do the Republican candidates want to eliminate, demolish social welfare programs, including Social Security and Medicare? What would happen? What would they do if they were elected?
Well, I don't think they would do much. I'm not a big fan of Romney. I don't think he's very much in favor of free enterprise. He favors the minimum wage law, which I regard as an economic abomination. He doesn't want to get rid of Social Security. Namely, these people, maybe Ryan less than Romney, give obeisance to the free enterprise system. In the debate, even Obama said that free enterprise is the bedrock of our society. Even Obama says it. So Romney can say it, but I don't think they mean it. because when the rubber meets the road, they're not really for getting rid of Social Security. They're not really for getting rid of socialized medicine. They're not really for getting rid of the welfare state. I think Obama is pushing us toward the pigs. Portugal, Italy, Greece, Spain, those countries in Europe.
That are going bankrupt.
And they're going bankrupt. And Obama is embracing this. And Obama is embracing this. And Romney is moving us toward Greece also, but maybe at a slower clip. But none of them really want to roll back anything. I mean, Ron Paul was talking about getting rid of 6 departments and getting rid of $1 trillion in the first year. And Gary Johnson is the same, similar sort of a thing. So I would say that the real heirs of Ayn Rand are Ron Paul and Gary Johnson, not Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan, even though Paul Ryan talks up Ayn Rand, but he doesn't really...
He claims to be supportive of her concepts.
Well, not really. I mean, Social Security.
Are you
to me
saying that whichever party gets the next 4 years, it will not change what's happening in our federal government very much?
I would agree with that. I would say that it's Tweedledum and Tweedledee, and it's the Demopublican versus the Republicrat. I see great similarities between the two, even though the media and the two of them are always trying to say how different they are. Romney talks good rhetoric, sort of like Ronald Reagan talked, limited government. But whenever Ronald Reagan was in charge of anything, whether in California or in the U.S., the budgets increased. I expect a much better rhetoric from Romney than from Obama, at least on economics.
If Ayn Rand were alive and elected president, what do you think she would do?
Well, she'd certainly get rid of Social Security. Social Security is just a Ponzi scheme. What's his name? That guy, I forget, who went to jail for...
I know what you're talking about.
Leonard Madoff? Bernie Madoff.
Yeah, for taking everybody's money.
Taking everybody's money. They ought to put the Social Security people in jail for Ponzi schemes. What you do is you take the money from older people or young people and give it to older people. Now, you and I are on the wrong side of 65 or the older side of 65. There's a question as to whether young people who are now putting in money for our retirement will ever get anything back.
And whether they're going to be willing to continue to put money in.
Right. And if they get money back, what will it be worth?
All right. So Ayn Rand would eliminate that.
She would eliminate Social Security. She would say, look, if people are so stupid that they can't save for their, I'm putting words into her mouth. This is me speaking, not her, but I'm sure I'm channeling her. If people are so stupid that they can't or won't or are unable to save for their old age, how are they smart enough to have the vote?
All right, but let's say they're not smart enough to save for their old age and they don't have a government assistance program. What happens to these people?
What happens to these people is what happens to these people before Social Security. We didn't have Social Security in 1776. It started in 1933 or 1934, somewhere in the 30s. I'm not sure exactly where. What happens is the family takes care of you. I mean, you're a grandpa, your children, your grandchildren take care of you. Social Security is a way of breaking up the family. And the family is a very important indication of economic well-being because most poverty occurs in broken up families. So Social Security, in addition to other reasons for breaking up the family, other welfare programs, breaks up the family. Without Social Security, people would get help from their children. They help their children when they're in their prime years, and then their children help them. That was the way that it always occurred before Social Security.
And is not happening now.
Well, why should it happen now? Because if you take care of grandpa or grandma, you're a fool because the government will take care of them.
All right. Well, now, what disturbs a lot of people when they know enough about Ayn Rand, and it is reflected in her book called The Virtue of Selfishness. Now, that really gets some people pretty much worked up. Why selfishness should be a virtue. How do you analyze that?
Well, they say that it's greed when you try to keep your own money. That's greedy. I have some money and I want to keep it. I'm greedy and I should give it away to other people. Look, who do you think really helped the world economy more? Mother Teresa, who is the embodiment of non-selfishness or charity, or Bill Gates, who in his previous life, forgetting about now with his foundations.
Yeah.
Who contributed more to the well-being of most people.
There's no question in my mind about that. In fact, Mother Teresa was a big fraud.
Oh, I didn't mean that. I mean, suppose you weren't a fraud. Let's come up with a
She presumably is helping the poor and poverty-stricken and sick and whatever.
Well, let's make up a platonic Mother Teresa, one who didn't have any fraud. Yeah, she helped, and Ayn Rand isn't against charity. Ayn Rand wouldn't say you go to jail if you commit charity, but the point is, there's a bad rap against greed and selfishness, and yet Adam Smith said it's not from benevolence that the butcher and the baker and the candlestick maker give us their products. It's out of a keen appreciation of their self-interest.
Well, then why is Bill Gates giving half of his fortune away?
That's fine.
That's not selfishness.
No. I'm not against.
That's altruism. Well, how does Ayn Rand come down on altruism?
Well, she would be against it. I don't agree with that. I think that what Bill Gates is now doing is perfectly virtuous. But I think that what he did before, when he amassed all the zillions of dollars that he's now dispersing, that too is virtuous.
I don't. I am in no way do I begrudge him his billions, because he did more than that for the world at large.
That's right. The way he made his billions was by enriching other people. Every time somebody bought a computer for $500, they valued that computer at more than $500, and they made a profit off of him. He made a profit too, because he valued the computer at less than $500. Namely, the market is mutually supportive.
And it has enlightened the world and educated the world with the use of his products. So, he's entitled to it all. But I just wonder, people wouldn't like it if he had not been giving some of it away.
Let's take a case from New Orleans. We're both from New Orleans. Let's take the case of Katrina.
Okay.
And let's talk about greed and selfishness. What happened after Katrina, which, by the way, was the government's fault, because the government took half the GDP away from us, and if they hadn't, we'd probably cure Katrina. And more specifically, it was the Army Corps of Engineers and FEMA. But what happened right after? What happened right after is prices shot through the roof. Prices of baby diapers and milk and orange juice and ice and water and stuff like that.
You mean locally?
Locally. Prices shot up through the roof. Mm-hmm. And what did Governor Blanco say to the applause of the masses? She said, this is gouging, this is selfishness, this is greed, we've got to stop it. Anyone who gouges, we're going to put him in jail. And everyone was applauding. Well, this is a misunderstanding of economics, and it's a misunderstanding of the benefit of greed. Because look, there are only two reasons, two motivations why somebody in Montana would come and help us. One would be benevolence, the other would be greed.
Okay.
Now, if the prices rise, if the prices are allowed to rise, then we mobilize the Montanan, I'm just picking Montana as an example, we mobilize both motivations of the Montanans to help us, namely benevolence or virtue or whatever, altruism, and greed. But if we say there's no price gouging, then the only motivation they have is benevolence. And as Adam Smith said, you can't rely on benevolence all that much. And even if you could, it's better to have all motivations, because we were in trouble post-Katrina. The second way that price rises were good is if I'm the first guy in Walmart and the prices are the old low prices and I can buy a gallon of water for 50 cents, I'm going to grab it all up. And you're at the end of the line, you're not going to get anything. Mm-hmm. But if the price of a gallon of water is now $15, I'm going to say, whoa, maybe I shouldn't be so greedy. Maybe I should be more considerate of the people at the end of the line in Walmart who just are walking in the store, and by the time I get through, there'll be nothing left if I grab it all. So here you have price rising being good in the sense that it encourages people to bring stuff to New Orleans, and it encourages us to share it out in some sort of more equitable way. And yet, the Governor Blanco and all the people in the city are saying, this is gouging, this is greed. So the way I interpret Ayn Rand is saying, let's make the case for greed. Greed is good too.
I was waiting to hear you say greed is good.
Greed is good. Me and Gordon Gekko.
And in all instances, you're saying?
Well, now you have to distinguish greed from... if a robber comes in with a gun and says, give me your wallet or I'll shoot you, that's greed also. But that's a different kind of greed. That's not market greed. That's coercion. That's a violation of rights.
Yes.
But if the reason that I want to make this wristwatch is to make a lot of money, and I'm going to make better wristwatches, lower price, higher quality, and I'll make a lot of money. That's okay. Or I want to cure cancer. Why? I don't care. I don't give a rat's rear end about people. I want to make money, let's say. And that kind of greed is fine. I will be led as if by Adam Smith's invisible hand to do good, even though good was no part of my intention, good for other people. It was just my intention to get a lot of money. And if I can get a lot of money by curing cancer or making a better watch or a better mousetrap or whatever it is, God save greed, so to speak. I'm an atheist, so I
Well, I'm glad that you came out and said that. Our banquet, which we had very recently for celebrating our 13th anniversary, and the theme of it was coming out of the closet as an atheist.
Ah, okay.
Politically speaking, non-believers have next to no clout because we don't know who they are. They're not there. If they would come out, as you just said, you're an atheist, if the ones who are would express that, we could influence politics seriously.
Well, Ayn Rand was an inveterate atheist. I mean, she was out of the closet. She was, God is an irrational concept, and when you say "thank God" or "there but for the grace of God," these are just expressions that people use, as I did before. But as an atheist, I'm just using it metaphorically.
Of course, when I had my recent accident and slipped and found myself flat on my back on the floor, you know what came out of my mouth? Jesus Christ.
Right. Well, Ayn Rand was a very famous atheist, which got in people's way. A lot of people didn't like it. She favored greed. She was a lady who was out there. She was magnificent.
Yes.
I remember seeing her, and her eyes would flash. I mean, when you were in her presence, you were in the presence of somebody with a lot of charisma,
and a very protective of her concepts, because during her lifetime, her book Atlas Shrugged should have been made into a movie.
Oh, yes.
It wasn't, because she would not give the rights unless she could have the final rights for cutting it, and no producer would give her that. Well, after her death, and I don't know who owns those rights, but they have done a partial movie of Atlas Shrugged, which I found less than satisfying, but you seem to be pleased with it. What is your view of that?
I love that movie. It brought tears to my eyes, as does the reading of Atlas Shrugged. I read that when I was in college, when I was maybe 22, and every 10 years, 32, 42, I must have read that book 5 or 6 times. I'm now 71, so I'm due for another reading of the book.
Okay.
I thought it was a magnificent book, and I thought the movie was marvelous. It really brought tears to my eyes. Now, it's true that a lot of the left media said this is no good, and the actors were not famous actors. They were all relative unknowns, but the movie was true to the book.
To a part of the book.
Well, to the first third of it.
Exactly. So a person who had not read the book and saw that movie wouldn't really know where it was going or where it would, or what the ending might be. They were just left hanging, which I found, I was sorry to see that. And we may or may not get the rest of that book. Well, what do you know anything about that?
Yeah, well, in my view, remember the series Roots about the black family, and they had like a 20 series or
on television.
On television, 20 episodes or 15 episodes. To me, Atlas Shrugged should have had that kind of a treatment. It should have had 15-hour-long treatments every day for 15 days.
So people would see the entire story.
Right. But for some reason, this didn't occur. And what they did is, about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I'm not sure, they did the first third of the book.
On a limited budget.
On a very limited budget, but I thought it was really good. And now, I think yesterday or today or tomorrow, they're coming out with the second installment.
Oh, is that what's coming up?
It's the second installment.
It wasn't clear to me. I saw something about Atlas Shrugged was going to be coming to the theaters. I just thought that the first showing was in limited theaters, that maybe now is getting mass coverage, but this is going to be a continuation?
A continuation. I'm not sure if it's the second third or if it's the last half. I don't know. But the reason that it got limited coverage is because all the lefty movie critics panned it. So it was in just a couple of dozen theaters, and the critics, talking about panning it, they panned the book. You know, there was a survey by, Modern Library. And Modern Library took 2 surveys. I think it was Modern Library, I'm not sure. One of those big publishers, maybe the publisher of Atlas Shrugged. And they had a survey of their customers and then of their employees. Which are the top 100 books? And among the customers, Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged was 1 or 2, and then We the Living and The Virtue of Selfishness and several of her other books. Fountainhead were, you know, I think she got 3 or 4 or 5 books in the top 15. Mm-hmm. And that was of the customers. Then what you do is you get the employees. And the employees are the people that are majoring in English literature and, you know, the sort of lefty types. None of the Ayn Rand books got into the top 100. So to me, it's not a surprise that journalists and movie critics, Siskel and Ebert, people like that, would just pan this because it's greed, it's selfishness, and we're all for social welfare now.
It didn't get big audiences either, did it?
No, it got very small audiences because it was panned. I mean, only the Ayn Rand fans would go out and see it, and there were plenty of Ayn Rand fans. That book came out in 1957, and it's, 50 years later now? More.
It's still
60.
selling.
It's still selling.
Yes.
That book is still selling. They say it's the second most influential book to the Bible in some surveys.
That's very impressive. Now, we've got a minute or more left,
Oh, no.
Walter, and so I'm going to let you say anything else you want to say about Ayn Rand or objectivism or whatever.
What I want to say is that this half hour goes so fast.
It certainly does.
Let me say that Ayn Rand, I have a warm spot in my heart for her. I use her books for my introductory classes. I'm a big fan of the book. I read it every 10 years. I get more out of it every time I read it, and I'm not having Alzheimer's, or at least I don't think I am. They say, what is it, the good thing about Alzheimer's, you make new friends every day. Well, I'm not making a new friend of this book. I remember it, and yet I see new subtleties in that book every time I read it. Everyone go out and get that book and read it again and watch the movie.
And you're not making any money off of their buying that book, so it's not a matter of greed.
Not on my, well, it is greed in behalf of liberty. I like liberty, and I think that book is the most promoting of liberty of any book ever written.
Walter, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me again.
Thanks to you folks for watching our show. I think you've probably found this half hour very stimulating, whether you agree or disagree with the concept. It's one that many people are talking about because of today's political climate. We hope you'll be with us again in the weeks that follow.